Hey guys, my name's Jax Atlantis, and today we are going to be taking a look at Pluto in the 7th house. Last week we took a look at Pluto in the 1st house. We talked a little bit about this, and at the end of it, I was talking about creating an extended audio file that would talk about progress charts, it would talk about composites, and it would talk about synastry as well for Pluto in the 1st. And then I thought to myself, it might actually be better to do this week first, to do Pluto in the 7th, to put these two videos and the audios of it together, and then to create a long audio file going back and forth between the 1st and the 7th. And the reason I like to do it this way is it's so much more useful to learn a planet in a house placement and then to learn the oppositional house placement. It really sort of drills in the information this way because it gives you a counter example, and it will help sort of strengthen your confidence in your interpretations. Whereas if you sort of offhandedly remember of this house, and then we have the 2nd house and the 3rd house, instead of doing it that way, that instead you're able to look at the understanding of how the archetypes oppose each other. So with Pluto in the 7th house, for example, we first look at Pluto in the 1st house. In Pluto in the 1st house, we had a character who in a way exudes power. We talked a little bit about how this will, of course, trigger a lot of people. A lot of people are not going to be able to handle this right off the bat. And the Pluto 1st house person will be tempted into finding relationships and connecting into relationships that are essentially ones that they know can't really stop them or can't hold them back in some way, or relationships in which they become incredibly enmeshed or incredibly of a dominant energy. And then when we have Pluto in the 7th house, we have the opposite expression here. We have Pluto in the 7th house, which shows a person who is incredibly good at being in relationships, almost in some cases too good. Just as the Pluto in the 1st house gives someone basically the soul essence through their personality. So rather than wearing their heart on their sleeve, they wear their soul on their sleeve. The Pluto 7th house is someone who's going to be able to be incredibly successful in relationships. Now, the one thing that comes with this is, just as the Pluto 1st house has to learn how to be in relationships, the Pluto 7th house has to learn to be without them. Now, that doesn't mean that the Pluto 7th houser is destined to be alone. Rather, they need to analyze and understand why it is exactly that they had so many of the difficulties that they had in relationships. And this will come out in a lot of different forms. So Pluto in 7th house can be as simple as, you find people, whether romantic partners or friendships, that you can have incredibly long-term connections with. And it is through the ending of that, whether it's a breakup, whether it's a fight, that it transforms you and changes you. Or in Pluto 7th house, you might be with someone who is in every way, shape, and form wrong for you. This is an energy that is no way compatible. And yet with Pluto in the 7th house, you psychically understand what this other person needs. And then there becomes this classic confusion where you say, well, the reason that they are behaving this way, the reason they're so angry, the reason that they're stressed, the reason that they're treating me this way is just because this need isn't being met, and I can see that psychically. So it's my responsibility to do something to alleviate that, and once I've done that, then they'll have a fair chance at being in this relationship. Now, of course, you don't apply that to your own self, and give yourself nearly that much leeway, but you give it to this other person. And part of the reason for that is because there might be a natural form of enmeshment here. There might be a natural type of codependence that forms here. But the reality is, if this person isn't willing to do that same thing for you, then there's part of you that understands that you need to find your own way. And it doesn't just apply romantically, because with Pluto in the 7th house, sometimes there will be teachers in your life, and you will have their guidance for a time. And then you'll sort of stay in a state where you think you consistently need their guidance, that you need your relationship partner's approval, that you need your friend to agree with you in order to go forward in your task, which is the very thing that Pluto 7th house has to learn. They have to understand what Pluto in the 1st house does. They have to let themselves be transformed of their own accord. They have to be able to go off independently. They have to be able to find a way to express themselves honestly and authentically without looking over their shoulder and seeing, is this other person that I lean on nodding their head yes. Now, the Pluto 7th houser doesn't necessarily have codependence on another person. However, they'll definitely be successful at creating relationships with people who naturally are codependent. Because, of course, there's a natural challenge here. There's a natural understanding. The person with codependence is going to feel understood by the Pluto 7th houser. The Pluto 7th houser also is going to think, because of their psychoanalytical abilities that they're just going to have naturally installed when it comes to relationships and connections. I understand what this person needs, therefore it's my responsibility to fix it. And if I fix it, then this person will be okay and we can finally have harmony. And the reality is, that's not actual harmony. It's essentially you have like a second career path, which is appeasing this other person and or being dependent on them needing you. Basically being dependent on them being dependent on you. Also, this can, come in the form of being attracted to, because in the 7th house, we have this, what we look for in other people. So you might, as a 7th house Pluto, look for a 1st house Pluto. You might look for someone who is incredibly radically powerful in some way, who exudes that power. And if this is the case, and you're someone who already had the proclivity for needing approval of other people, and you choose someone who's incredibly enigmatic and incredibly strong, and someone who magnetizes the things they want in life and goes for them independently, and from the Pluto 1st house's point of view, you were that 7th house Pluto person who they thought, well, this person essentially won't get in my way. This person won't hold me back, and therefore this will be kind of an easy hands-off relationship. Things can work in that sense. Whereas the 7th house Pluto person falls into the illusion of constantly needing the validation from this relationship, or this 1st house Pluto person who cannot give that to the 7th house Pluto person, because the 1st house Pluto person is learning how to be in relationships, and the person who is naturally skilled at relationships is supposed to learn how to finally go off on their own. So the 7th house Pluto person, a lot of people say that this is, it's a really terrible placement to have. It's really not. It's really, learning to be on your own does not mean that means that you have to end your life being essentially a singular entity, that it won't end in marriage, that it won't end in some long-term soul connection. What it simply means is that you have to be able to learn to move forward without anyone else agreeing with you, where it's possible that people will put out ultimatums, which is a very classic thing that is thrown out in front of 7th house Plutos, is an ultimatum, which essentially you have to choose between the person and doing what it is that you believe in. And so naturally you're going to be shown that test several times, because your natural proclivity is going to be to give in to the other person's power, or to give in to the other person's strength. And so allowing your 7th house Pluto to be a strength, allowing it to be something that helps you identify what other people need and to work with them, and to keep your own identity and your own desires in mind, and to be able to have like a state of balance that's in that, because of course in the 7th house it's analogous to Libra, and so there's the pursuit of balance, not necessarily having it, but the pursuit of balance at the very least, and being able to find situations in which people, whether or not they actually also have 7th house Pluto, are able to reciprocate to you the way that you've always been able to do to those 1st house Pluto types. And what this can create the illusion of is that, the suggestion is that 1st house Pluto types are in some way bad or something. They're absolutely not. They're incredibly strong, and strength can be used in a lot of different ways. There's also a lot of other different people with tons of different placements for different reasons that are going to be on sort of the scale of potentially taking advantage of a 7th house Pluto person for loads of different reasons. Someone with Mars in Cancer might do it as a way of, being overbearing or controlling, whereas someone with 1st house Pluto might do it just from simply having just a self-focus that is just too much. Whereas someone in Leo might do it for, a completely different reason. Whereas someone in Virgo might do it because they feel essentially as it's the most effective or most efficient way to have a relationship, and that is essentially what it is that they were originally looking for. So there's a million different ways that these energies can participate with each other, but what the 7th house Pluto is essentially in danger of at all times, until they find their life lesson of finding out who they really are, is being taken advantage of. because you're just so good at being a friend, in the sense that not only will you have the natural desire to be incredibly close to a person, you'll also have a very strong psychic ability to understand what it is that they need, which makes you very effective at that. And the ability to lose yourself in this process is like almost, it's almost more likely than not if unchecked. And so that is your biggest lesson as a 7th house Pluto. So I hope that this has helped you guys. If you guys go to clearsightconsulting.net, I'm going to have the Pluto 1st house, Pluto 7th house put together, as well as an extended audio where we're going to talk about what happens when you have Pluto in your progressed 7th house, or when you have Pluto in your progressed 1st house. Also, what happens when you in a relationship partner, or you in a friendship, in your synastry chart, you have aspects to each other's Plutos if it's in one of those 2 houses. And also, what happens if you in a relationship partner, or you in a business partner, in your composite chart have a 1st house Pluto or a 7th house Pluto. For these 2 in particular, these are 2 of the most interesting when it comes to our external connections, or our way of connecting to other people. Through the rest of the placements, they're all very interesting in tons of different ways, but these 2 in particular are very unique for relationships and business partnerships. So thank you guys for tuning in today. Please comment below if you guys had any questions, and I will talk to you all next week.